Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write better fiction. I'm Steve McLean, an aspiring writer,
And I'm Heather Luby, the managing editor of the Citron Review.
and Aaron is not with us right now. He's up at a Christian camp right now, enjoying himself, up in Hume Lake. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Have you ever heard of it?
I can't say that I have,
Yeah,
but for all I
same
know,
thing.
Aaron made it up. He
Yeah,
just didn't want to hang out with us.
right. Okay, so we are today discussing characters and how to create characters, the process of building them. Um, Heather, you happen to teach on this subject, and you have a lot of thoughts and ideas on it. In your opinion, what's the first step, the most important thing to building a new character?
The most important thing.
Well, what's the first step? How's that?
Well, I will say yes, I do teach a class on character creation. I actually taught one just last fall called Focus on Fiction, and it was just character development. I think one of the things that I tell students right off the bat with character is that we are often tempted to create characters that are thinly veiled versions of ourselves or
Mhm.
of other people that we know. And that it's an understandable thing to do. Sometimes that's what helps us get into the story, but it's also a very dangerous thing to do. So I normally start off my class by telling students that when they think about creating their characters, that I warn them to avoid this what I will call a mistake. And the reason why I call it a mistake is mainly because whenever a character is based on yourself or based on someone that you know closely, you end up limiting where the story can go because it will be limited to what you think this real person would or would not do, which doesn't
Mhm.
always serve the story. You might need the story to go in a direction that and a character to make decisions that you yourself wouldn't make or that someone that you're basing your character on wouldn't make, and that can limit the story. So I always
Right.
start out by just telling the students, let's brainstorm. We'll talk about all the ways to create characters, and I really encourage them to branch out of that easy fallback of just their characters just being themselves or someone they know.
Yeah, I actually had that problem where I would create a character and I would model the character after me, and so they would make decisions more like the kind of decisions that I would make. And I found out that I'm a pretty boring person when it comes down to it because I don't make really crazy decisions and things. I don't have a whole lot of really major, deep conflicts and things that make for interesting characters. I don't have those things. I'm just kind of a normal guy. So, and it's funny actually, I wrote two characters in a story that I was working on for a while, which has since been revised and kind of turned into a different thing. But anyway, in one of the early iterations, I had the main character, and the main character was kind of a little bit more of a play it safe type of person, somebody who was more thoughtful and would do things in a compassionate way, but not necessarily a risk-taking way, those types of things. Then the other character, he would do things like, uh, you know, the characters had this special power where they could manipulate matter. And so the kid was being a bully, so he decided to open up a hole in the ground and drop the bully into it. And as I started to explore that character, I thought, geez, this guy is way more interesting, and he bucks authority. And when people come after him because he's using his powers and abilities in the wrong way, he doesn't just roll over and say, "Oh, I'm sorry." He fights back, and thought, geez, I should be telling this guy's story because it's so much more interesting. And the character that was modeled after me, not.
Well, and I always, I think you're plenty interesting, Steve, but we can all be honest that most of us would prefer our lives not play out in a typical plot
Right.
of a novel.
Or if you're modeling a character after somebody that you don't necessarily want horrible things to happen to them. Or even if you're creating characters that you feel like are just characters that you really relate to and really like, and they're not necessarily based 100% on you or on someone else. You have to be willing to do things with the character that will put them into uncomfortable situations, and that's another element of this. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I tell people, don't be afraid to steal. You can steal character traits of people that you know in real life, from other characters you've read about, from movies that you've seen. And of
Right.
course, whoever you are as a writer, who you are as a person, as much as we try to mask it when we're writing, does somewhat bleed through our characters, through our own perspectives and experiences, even if we're framing them and they're completely different than us. And the circumstances we put them in are nothing we've ever experienced. We, the author, are still writing it, so it would be impossible to completely remove ourselves and our bias and thoughts and experiences from the creation of that character.
Right.
And
Okay,
all
so
of that is perfectly fine.
yeah. So when you're creating a character, and obviously that character needs something about them that makes them unique,
Mhm.
needs something behind their motivations, and some kind of conflict, to preventing them from getting that thing that they're motivated to get. So describe for me the process for you as you begin to create characters and how that looks, and if you could just describe that.
Sure. I know that we've talked about this before, that Aaron and I are both very much discovery writers. So when I'm creating a character, I'm sort of discovering them along the way in that first draft, which
Right.
I think is true whether or not you've sort of created a character sketch ahead of time or not. I mean, every writer really gets to know their character through the process of writing. And even if you think you know them, even if you've written out a biography and you know their past experiences, and you know about their parents' first date even, there is something about the process of writing a novel that whoever you thought your character was in chapter 1 is going to be different than really who they end up being, because you really grow to know them as you're writing them.
Right.
For me, as I grow through the process of learning my character, through writing them, the things that I like to think about are some of the things that you just touched on. Motivation is extremely important. Your character has to want something. I think it's also really important that you think about the skills and the occupations that you can give your characters. I sometimes
Yeah.
think that this is just a treasure box of something that a lot of writers sort of overlook. But what your main character does for a job, or what other particular skills that they might have, are the particular things that can help you advance the plot and help demonstrate something about their character. If you want to show that your character is analytical and a logical thinker, then when you think about their occupation, make them an architect. If you want somebody who loves excitement and adventure, make them a fireman. If they need to at some point figure something out in the story, then you need to start dropping these seeds that they're the type of person that has a skill set that would help them figure things out.
Yeah,
All
that
these little
makes a lot of
seeds and
sense.
that
It
help
annoys
develop.
me. Yeah, it annoys me when a character who isn't predisposed to being good at something does that very thing that they're not good at in order to move the story along. Something along those lines. That just frustrates me a lot. You know, I'm
And in
reading
a
a book
way,
right
that's
now,
sort of
and
lazy writing. It's not like you can't work that in. If you discover that in your first draft, you've got your second, third, fourth, whatever drafts to make sure that you're laying the foundation
yeah,
of sort of this deep character development.
right. And that's the question, most times when you get into a conversation with somebody, that's one of the first questions that comes up is, so what do you do? And that is how, especially in America, how we identify with each other when we talk, and how we find out about that other person is we ask what that other person's profession is. And if you are the driver of a trash truck, that says something about you. Just like if you are the driver of a space shuttle.
Oh, absolutely. Everything, well, driver of a space shuttle is an interesting way of putting it. but um, but it's all those little things. about a person, if you think about how you meet someone in real life, how we dress, our patterns of speech, whether or not we have an accent, how we address other people, how we do our hair, everything is a clue into the type of person that we are.
Well, and something else that Aaron has said before, and I really like this, and it's something that I keep in mind when I'm writing is as you're doing description in your book, if you're describing the things that your character would notice, you're revealing things about your character at the same time as establishing your setting or whatever it is you're trying to describe. I thought that was really,
Absolutely.
really key. That's very, very good.
As you say, I completely agree with that. And I think that those are the best ways to reveal character is through their actions, by giving them motivations, by seeing them interact with other characters, is by what they say, as you said, what they notice. I also think that people forget that when they're thinking character, they're thinking about filling out, like I said, character bios, for instance. They're not thinking about how the other elements of fiction inform character.
Hmm.
You said what they notice, right, around them reveals their
Right.
character.
Right.
I always tell people that, your setting of your novel, of your fiction piece, if it's a short story, reveals character, right? Because we are partly who we are because of the place and time that we are in. Your
Right.
character can't be separate from the world that they inhabit, whether that be in a science fiction novel, whether that be historical fiction, whether that be present day in different geographic locations around the world.
Right.
So your setting develops and reveals your character.
Yeah,
So
I
does
totally agree.
so does dialogue, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was talking with Aaron, what was it, yesterday? Day before yesterday? Something like that. Anyway, one of 2 days ago, and we were talking about how you can reveal so much with characters when they're both talking, but they're both having slightly different conversations. One is saying one thing, but the other one is saying something else, and they're not quite on the same topic. Um, the thing that comes to mind is this is what I was bringing up to him was the story that I cannot remember the author's name now. I want to say it's White Elephant or something like that. Help me.
The hills like what elephants?
Thank you.
Talking about Hemingway?
Yep. Yes, Hemingway.
Okay.
Right. Awkwardly, I could not remember that name.
That's okay.
Anyway, and you notice like the entire conversation that she's saying one thing and he's saying something completely different, and it reveals so much about those two characters as you progress through it. And she's after one thing and he's after another, but they're both talking about the same thing, but they're both saying completely different things, and both of those, but both sides of the conversation really reveals a lot about each of them, and you can do that in your writing with your
Absolutely.
dialogue.
I know that from some of the notes that I've sent you and some of the discussions we've had, there are some particular authors that I think that are fantastic at character development, but a way of putting a character on the page for us that is different. It isn't just this straight description, right?
Right.
It isn't just telling someone how tall someone is or where they grew up or putting them in a place and time or anything like that. Or even
Yeah.
saying what their motivation is. But there are particular ways in which we describe our characters that not only kind of sets the tone and mood of a novel, but presents the character in a specific way. I know
Yeah.
I'm a broken record when I talk about Daniel Woodrell, but he's one in particular, and I know I sent you some examples.
Hmm.
One, for instance, and it's very short, so I'm going to read it, is in the book Winter's Bone, and it is when we are meeting Gale, who is Ray's best friend. And it goes, quote, Gale had a baby named Ned, who was 4 months old, and a new look of baffled hurt, a left behind sadness, like she saw that the great world kept spinning onward and away, while she'd overnight become glued to her spot.
Hmm.
So with that
Yeah.
one line, we sort of see everything we could possibly know about Gail, right? I mean, she's a teenage mom. We feel her melancholy, her sadness. We kind of already know what her future is going to be. Woodrow has put in there, in that one line, so much about that one character. It
Yeah.
doesn't come, as I said, as some sort of direct description of, what she looks like or what she's thinking.
So I think what you're hinting at is that you really want to focus as much as you can on showing rather than just telling people. Like, he was tall. He wore a tall stovepipe hat. He had a beard. He had a deep voice and sunken cheeks, and he was the president. Things like that.
Exactly. I mean, because people read that, but that doesn't make the character come alive on the page. We have to see our characters interacting with the world around them, right? Don't tell me a character is a slob. Show me what their bathroom looks like when they're getting ready in the morning. Show
I
me
would
the
carry
smudge of
the
mascara
camera
on a
in there
girl's
right now,
face.
but just kidding.
But
Yes.
those are the things that like bring life to your character in the story. Everything else, even if it's beautifully written, it sort of lays flat on the page.
Right. Yeah. It's something like when you include. I go back to trying to describe something in the setting or something around them or a particular thing. When a person, notices. Okay, so I'll take a specific example from my book. One of my characters, he notices when they first get to a new town or a new port, he notices the guy coughing over 20 feet away. Out of everything else, he notices the guy that's coughing. And then he starts noticing, the area isn't quite as sanitary as he would prefer. And he notices that, the smoke is blowing across the people and they're all inhaling it and it bothers him. Things like that start to tell you what kind of a person this is. I mean, he's the ship's surgeon, and he's generally concerned with the health and well-being of people, and what is he getting himself into when he walks into a situation? What's he exposing his crew to? And the decisions that are made. Typically, he always reinterprets them in the light of how's this going to make my job harder? And that's one of the things that I'm trying really hard to do. I go back and I reread the stuff that I've written, and I think, man, I'm trying to tell the reader who this person is, and I need to just cut that whole section out where I'm describing him as, he's meticulous, and he will always say or do these types of things, and that's good to go into maybe like a character sketch, but not to be on the pages that your reader's going to read.
Exactly. I mean, that's fine in a first draft, but you're right. When you're revising, you need to look at those paragraphs of description and think about. It does, like I said, it does you no good to say, oh, he's worried about the environment, he's meticulous, he's worried about the well-being. You're much better off letting him observe and interact
Right.
with the world around him in such a way that tells the reader that without you putting it out explicitly on the
Yeah.
page. I think sometimes that's referred to also as like a telling detail, right? Something that is unique, has like an essence about it that we describe, of how we describe our characters, but that with one particular detail tells us so much more about them without us needing to go into some big long description.
Yeah. So, one of the things that that you and Aaron love to do is discovery write. And Aaron mentioned in the last podcast that he did with Maya Good and his dad, Alton Gansky, he was talking about how he'll get toward the end of a book that he's written, and at that point, he'll suddenly realize who this character really is, and then he has to spend a whole bunch of revision making that character true to themselves throughout the book as he's going. Um, I have a different kind of a problem because I typically write an outline and then I start working on the story, page by page. And at that time, I am still discovery writing my characters because I haven't learned how to properly outline a character. and have them be convincing and anything better than two-dimensional. So I'm discovering my characters as I'm writing them. And one of two things happens. One, I discover something about my character that I hate and don't like and can't deal with because it steals the story away. So then I have to go back and re-envision my character to make the character more easily fit into the story and not steal it away from me. Because I write an outline for a reason. Even though it might be an interesting character, I have to still find a way to make the character interesting and also fit the story. Otherwise, I'm telling a different story than I originally intended.
Which
That's
would
one
be
of
just terrible, Steve.
I know. So one of two things. So there's
Or
that,
not.
or I have to go back and I change the outline because my characters have taught me something very important about themselves. And so now I have to go back and adjust the outline and potentially adjust the other characters and the other elements of the story that I've been working on in order to fit this new revelation. So I discover, write the character, I learn more about the character, which ultimately modifies the story overall, or I decide I need to throw this stupid, annoying character out and refit a new one into the same place and the same name.
I think that that's a common approach. I mean, I could be wrong, but in my experience and with a lot of writers that I've talked to, as I kind of started out the discussion, I think it's impossible to really truly know your character before you've written their story.
Yeah.
You may think you know them, you could have done character sketches and you could know their bios and all these sorts of things, but it really isn't until that you put them into your fictional world, make them interact with other people, make them make decisions, move them forward, that you really truly, I think, get a deep sense of who they are.
Yeah.
Before that, you have an idea of who they are, but you haven't really experienced who they are yet. And I think it takes the process of writing the story to really figure out who your character is. I don't really get too worked up in that first draft in terms of going back and fixing things as my character sort of takes on more of a life of its own. I always consider that later work, because I meant it earlier that I really do have to get to the end of the story before I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? Now I really do understand who this character is. And what that means is it means my second draft might be very different than what I thought it would be and what that first draft is, because when I go back and I pretty much rewrite the story for that second draft, I'm rewriting it finally grasping who my character is in a way that it just couldn't know in the first draft. You just can't know.
But isn't there a shortcut? Seriously, I wish that there was a shortcut because
I
it's
wish there was a
painful.
button, right? Doesn't Staples have like a button?
You know
No.
what? Probably what you got to do is just pull out the old Dungeons and Dragons book and roll a character. This is when Aaron needs to be here to
It
back me
is
up,
true. I mean, though
right?
I was thinking earlier today that we should totally do a podcast on archetypes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, that would be
because we were
really
talking
fun.
about characters, and that's like a whole other discussion. But I was like, ooh, we should really have a podcast where we talk about archetypes as well.
Yeah, we did that. Maybe 30 episodes ago, something like that. I
Oh,
think that we should totally
yeah.
revisit that.
You should totally revisit
Definitely.
it with me.
Yeah, we should. That would be awesome. We'll plan it. Are you around next week? Let
I
everyone
am
know.
around next week.
Okay, so if you're around next week, we'll grab Aaron and we'll do character archetypes. How's that sound?
That sounds good to me.
This is great. We're already planning our next episode.
Already planning, so
Amazing.
if you're listening, right, come next week. Um, but yeah, I mean, I know we were kind of touching on it, but you know, it's the telling details. For me, that is the thing that I really believe is the difference between creating the term of like the difference between like the flat character and the round character.
Yeah,
It's being able to see, you know, the girl who would scotch tape her hemline,
right,
right?
right. You're funny.
It's knowing that like tiny detail about someone that reveals something so much deeper about their character and who they are.
Right. Hey, we have Maya actually in the comments. Maya, I tried to give you an invite so you can actually join in and talk with us. I don't know if you got
That would
that.
be wonderful.
But I see you left a couple comments here on the page, which I am terrible at checking because that's normally Aaron's job, and I totally forgot. So I'm sorry. But she says, I always forget about the mannerisms. I was watching an interview where the man kept touching his nose in a very distinct way I hadn't seen him do before. It made me realize he was nervous and impressed by his guest, and it made me really look at the mannerisms of my characters. I like to think of an outline, as she also said, I like to think of an outline as being a dotted line rather than something I can't change. And I agree. I do change my outlines as I discover more about my characters, but the deal is that sometimes I have a character that's not a character that's like this. It might be a secondary character. That's the word that I'm looking for, a secondary character. And they steal the show and like run away with it, and I can't let that happen. So I go around murdering characters all the time. It's kind of a hobby of mine. So.
Just wouldn't be that. That would be nice if we could do that in real life.
She also says, I think the more you work on a character, the less that happens, which could be considered a shortcut. But I'm not sure spending months on meditation and writing 100 pages in a character's voice, even then stuff is going to change. Yeah, I mean, it's like a moving target all the time. It's never going to just be, oh, hey, I got this, and now I can go. And I think even when you're done penning the last page in your book, you might look back and think, did I do that right? I'm reading a book right now, and it establishes early on that the main character doesn't like riddles. And then later on, he's talking about his dad was giving him, he doesn't like riddles because he can never solve them because of the form in which they're delivered. And then later on, he talks about how his dad used to give him riddles and how he'd just immediately figure them out. And I thought, geez, what a contradiction. And then it never explains why that is. And I think that you just get little leftovers and little things in your writing where you weren't necessarily completely true to the character, and that's just going to happen. It's unfortunate and whatever, but overall, the books that I'm reading are really good, by the way. But that was
that's sort of what happens too, that when you start reading like a writer. We've talked about that before. I catch so many things now that I don't think that I caught 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. The constant active writing and being a writer changes how I read.
Yeah, well, that's something that Alton Gansky, Aaron's dad, was talking about. He was saying he wants to go back and revive an old book that he had written a long time ago. He said, but I need to go and like freshen it up and fix a few things. I doubt he's actually going to like rewrite the book or anything. But the thing that I got from it was he said, I'm such a better writer now. I've learned a lot of things. But also just looking back on a book like that you've written, and you realize how much you could do to improve upon it and make it better. And I know we're talking about characters, and I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but that's another aspect of what I'm working on is and I'm an aspiring writer. I honestly getting
Aren't
published
we all, Steve?
right. Well, getting published is not necessarily one of my goals. I just really like writing for the sake of writing. So maybe that's bad in some ways because I'm not under the gun to really get anything completely finished. But every time I do another go through and work on my book, I think, well, now I know this and I know that and I know all these extra things. I need to go back and like fix all these things when I was writing without that really important knowledge. So then I go back and I fix things and I make them better and whatever.
That's why I think it's actually always really important that you put away your work for a while. I recently have been revisiting a short story, and I'm sort of on maybe what would be referred as like the 4th or 5th draft at this point. Mm-hmm. But I wrote it over a year ago, and I put it in a drawer for like 8 or 9 months, and I came back to it with a perspective that I did not have when I was in the midst of working those first few drafts. And I think the thing could be true for stories or for novels, that sometimes if you have the patience, put work away and come back to it. We're always learning something new. I know I'm stealing this line from someone else, but I remember reading the quote, which was, "The book you are writing now will not be the best book you ever write."
Yeah, that's
And
just
that's
terrible.
completely true.
That makes me feel so bad.
But now, I mean, it should be very liberating because this doesn't have to be the best book in the world. And whatever book you write next will be better than this one because you just said so yourself. You learn things along the way. And not just learn things, but the sheer act of writing, of putting in the hours of writing, make you a better writer. So the more you write and the more time you spend writing, the better you will become. So the book that you write now will never be as good as a book that you write 5 years from now.
Yeah, I agree. But if I just wait and write the book now, 5 years from now, that'll be the really good book, right? I mean,
Remember,
here's the
it's
problem
the,
is
the 10,000 hour rule, Steve. We all need to put in 10,000 hours writing.
right. Uh, I guess there's got to be a point where you just move on. I don't know.
Let me ask you something, aspiring writer, because you said that you have a hard time sometimes not basing characters on yourself,
Yeah.
right? And I think we've used this term before, at least I think I have, of when you're writing a character, if instead of sort of method acting, which is what a lot of actors say that they do, right? Method acting, if you ever
Bunch of weirdos.
use that in writing, do you ever do that?
Do I ever method act?
Uh-oh,
Well,
I did
not
something
method
wrong.
act, but do you ever use that in the act of writing?
Hey, hey, we have Maya. Hey, Maya.
Hello, Maya.
Oh,
No
she's muted.
microphone yet.
He says, hold on a second. Okay. Anyway, yeah, do I ever method act? You know, Aaron said that he's had conversations with his characters before, or he's tried to do that, where you interview them. Have I ever method acted?
Well, I kind of mean it in the way that
Are you
I know
asking
when
me if I
I was.
LARP, like live action role play?
Now that would be really cool. But I know that for me, it was really hard when I was writing Laws of Motion because I had a first-person male character.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously not a man. But I really had to get into that headspace. And I really had to envision myself as him, view the world as him.
So
So
how
much
did
so
Jason feel
that,
about that? I'm just asking.
what?
How was Jason feeling about that? So many jokes come to mind.
Very off topic. And I wish I had something clever to say. But I'm sure whatever it was, it would be embarrassing to both of us.
Oh my goodness.
But
Okay.
yeah, you kind of have to get so deep into that headspace of who your character is and thinking the way that they would think. That, I mean, I would find sometimes that it would take me hours after writing to really shake off Tom, my character, to really feel like I wasn't him because I would get so invested in that first person narration when I was writing it.
Was he the type of guy that would randomly belch out loud and then scratch himself?
No, but
Oh, okay.
I don't plan on taking on a persona like that if I want to stay married.
Okay. I'm gonna have to read. What did you say it was that you wrote? This was a short story piece?
No, this was the novel that I wrote.
Oh, this is a novel that you wrote. Okay.
Right. Though it's
And
confusing because I write almost predominantly from the male perspective. But
really,
this was for my book.
really.
Yeah, I
Where's
think
that book? I've never actually asked you. Are you published? Have you written something and been published?
I have not been published yet, but I do have an agent. Bill Kintardi of Branton Hockman is my agent. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
So
All
I
right.
finished the book, and he and I have worked through revisions, and we've shopped it some, and I actually have said book in a drawer right now because I felt like there were some changes that I wanted to make to it before we did more with it, before we shopped it around anymore, and I have to feel like I'm ready to make them. But yeah, I think I always talk about the Citron review, but yes, I have in fact written a book.
Wow. Very cool.
And short
I
stories.
I think Maya, are you with us now?
Yeah, I think it worked.
Hey,
Sorry
All
about
Maya!
right,
that.
there you are.
I could not get my headphones to pair.
Oh, really? Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm loving your conversation so far. I'm really, really loving it.
Great, right on. So do you have any comments you want to bring to the table here? We're just
Oh no, everything just froze.
Oh no. Uh-oh. She just froze too. She's down there like she's got a perpetual smile. Now she's moving on.
Oh, that was a shame.
Are you there?
You know what? I'm just gonna have to bail out tonight. It looks like I'm having problems. Sorry, I'm just gonna have
Okay.
to listen to you later.
All right.
Bye.
No problem. To let everyone know, my original goal was actually to try to get a whole bunch of writers on here so that we could all talk character development together and just have a good little roundtable discussion. Um,
Seems like you and I get
but
stuck talking about character because didn't we do one on naming characters?
yeah, I think we did, and
Yeah, because I was
yeah,
looking through my notes and I had a section on, you know, naming your characters, and I was like, oh wait, we did that already,
yeah,
and it was
that's
you
right.
and I when Aaron
Yeah,
was gone.
I do remember that. And we were talking about names like Domina, Traidus, and Concodius.
That's
Two
right.
names I'm still very proud of, but can never see the light of day. Anyway, Maya, really sorry that you weren't able to get connected here, but we'll have you on a future episode. Actually, what we need to do with her is connect on Facebook and then get her as part of our alumni group, which would be good.
Yeah, so that
So that way we can
can
include you, Maya, on future episodes and clue you in on the discussion topics that we have behind the scenes for First in Fiction, where we plan episodes by the seat of our pants. It's pretty fun.
that's pretty much how we
Luckily,
do it.
luckily Heather has all kinds of notes and things that she's written, and Aaron has a blog back catalog that could fill a book on its own. And so I just basically sit down and do nothing and mooch off of your guys' hard work.
You know what? You're the only reason why this podcast works, because if it were just Aaron and I, he and I would start bloviating and people would just
You know what? I'm not going to argue that might be
because
what you're
Aaron and I
doing.
are both teachers, so we're used to like talking at people and then being required to listen to us.
I see. You know what? Actually, that's a good idea. I should become a teacher so that way people have to sit there and listen to me. I've been doing it all wrong. Anyway.
Not only do they have to sit there, but they've paid for the privilege.
Right. That's really a trick to get people to pay to sit there and have to listen to you. That's impressive.
At least once.
Actually.
They do it at least once.
Anyway, getting back to the subject at hand, we'll probably want to wrap up here pretty soon because I think
Sure.
we're coming up on time, or actually we're over time. So I hope you get paid overtime. Anyway, so what are some closing comments? What would you like people to know about creating characters that you think is an important takeaway?
Well, I know this will sound, a little bit like a summary, but I would just really encourage any writer when they're thinking about their character to first and foremost realize that they don't have to have that character all figured out before they write. That character creation is a journey. To be patient and let yourself, as the writer, discover your character as you are writing them. To be willing to let that character develop on their own without relying on your own personality traits or those of someone that you know as a crutch. It's okay to steal things and use them to your advantage, but not to use them as a crutch, to let that character sort of be their own person. Give them, motivation that is all their own and traits that are all their own to help them develop. And then the last thing would be is, maybe not so much in that first draft, but when you go back and you're revising and you're working on subsequent drafts, to really look for those opportunities where, let's say if you have a paragraph of description about your character, look for an opportunity to find, the perfect telling detail, the one thing that you can say about your character that replaces, those 4 or 5 sentences. We look for those opportunities to cut big chunks of description and exposition about our character and instead find a way of telling all of that information in a more simplistic telling way.
Okay, let me challenge you on that
Yes.
and say that when you have only one line that encapsulates a character, doesn't that feel a little bit like it could be pigeonholing your character, making them
Well, you
more
actually have
two-dimensional?
many one-lines. I mean, you're striving for using telling details as opposed to, as you said before, as opposed to saying such and such is a doctor and he's germophobic and always concerned about the environment around him. You could go on for several sentences, right, describing all of these things about him. Or you could just say, Dr. So-and-so, let's say, pulled his coat up around his mouth when the man next to him coughed.
There you go. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you might have lots of instances where you're giving those telling details. You're not limited to one by any means. In fact, you want to use as many as you can.
Right.
The key to the good telling detail is being able to tell something in one sentence and save yourself writing a paragraph that is really almost just filler, right?
Yeah, I agree.
You want to be an efficient writer.
Yeah.
And the telling detail is the way to efficiently bring your character to life on the page and quickly. That way, that character comes to life from them right from the beginning of the book, not 50 pages in.
Yeah. Now, as far as developing a character and building the character, finding their personality and building them, one of the things that you mentioned in the notes that you sent me was taking a moment to actually go through your character's thought process where they ask themselves, what my motivation is and what's it all about for me, and then on the page write out their thoughts and what they're thinking. And obviously those are your own thoughts, and some of the thoughts that are going to go into that write-up. It's almost like a free write. That's going to be your own thought, and it's not necessarily going to apply to the character, but through that process, through that writing process, you should be able to develop and flesh out the character a little bit more. And you don't just do that once. You do that a lot of times, and keep after it, because I think that's one of the things that I'm getting from this episode right now is that there is no real shortcut. You have to spend a lot of time and a lot of hours and sometimes a lot of drafts developing people into convincing real characters. And then when it comes to bringing those elements out, we spend a lot of time talking about showing rather than just telling in description. Right. And so I think those are the two key components in having compelling characters. Very good.
I agree with you, Mr. McLean.
Excellent. All right. Okay, well, let's...
We needed Aaron to be here because he and I sometimes don't always agree. So next time we have to find somebody to disagree with us.
Yeah.
We're too agreeable.
I'll try to find somebody that's incredibly difficult. We'll get Andrew on. What do you think?
That's right. I was going to say the same thing. Where's Andrew when you need him? We can pick on him because he's not here.
Oh, man, I love that guy. Okay.
He's going to make up a word for his website about us.
Exactly. Okay, let's wind this down. Getting into contact with us, Heather. How can people find you?
I'm really simple. You can find me at heatherluby.com. If you go there, there's going to be ways to connect to me through Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus and all those good things.
And if they want to read the Citron Review?
You can go to thecitronreview.com. You can also just Google the Citron Review. We had a new issue that came out in June, which is our summer issue, and then we will be having another issue that will come out in September, which will be our fall issue, and we are open for submissions right now.
Very cool. Very zesty.
Yeah.
All right. Citron. It's a Citron joke. If you want to find Firsts in Fiction, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/firstsinfiction. If you want to find us on Twitter, we are at Firsts in Fiction. Find us there, connect with us. Aaron's at aarongansky.com. If you want to find me, I have a blog that I sometimes keep up with, and that is stevemclean.wordpress.com. Let me say it again because I just screwed it up. stevemclean.wordpress.com. get over there, leave me a comment, and tell me that I need to write more. That would be great. Anyway, that's it for today. I don't actually remember how we do our sign off at this point, but until next time,
Good writing.
there you go.
There you
Thank
go.
you, everyone, for watching. Maya, we'll try to connect with you next time. How's that sound? We should have you on to talk about character archetypes. I think that'd be great.
That would be great.
We'll have the four of us. Maybe we'll have Yuvi on. Maybe we'll have Andrew on. Maybe we'll have Alton and Cindy.
You know, I will try to butter up UV. He and I think either tomorrow or the next day, we have a catch-up Google Hangout ourselves. Just
cool.
he and I to chat. So I'll see if I can't persuade him to jump on with us sometime soon.
Awesome. Very good. Yeah, apparently his recording spot was 110 degrees. So I understand this time, but not
Absolutely.
next time. No.
Nobody wants
All right.
that.
So we'll see you all next Tuesday at 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Heather, what time is that for you?
It was 10 p.m. here in
Wow.
the Central Time Zone.
Wowzers. That's so late. Anyway, okay, well, thank you all for joining us, and appreciate it. See you next week.